In my 4 years of studying economics, if I wanted to talk about climate change, ocean acidification, hole in the ozone layer, breakdown of biodiversity, chemical pollution, air pollution, I was offered 2 words. Yes, these are environmental externalities. And to me, this is just an alarm bell, because if in the 21st century, the way we talk about the living world and its degradation and the breakdown of the systems on which we depend, if the only way that economics has to talk about that is to call it an environmental externality, this tells us that the theory is really not up to the challenges that it claims to address. And the reason that happens is because on day one, worldwide, this is another question I say to audiences, okay, everybody in the audience who put their hand up who said they've ever studied economics, what's the first thing you remember learning in your economics classes? The world over, supply and demand. As if to say, welcome to economics, here is the market, as if the economy is just the market and the market's in equilibrium. But because economics, the way it's currently taught, starts day one with supply and demand, it places at the center of its analysis and its worldview market exchange and price information carrying value. And therefore anything falls outside of the value that's captured in the contract between those who did the supply and the demand is called an externality, because it's external to the price mechanism contract. That then, and economists could explain this very rationally, but it's external to the contract. Okay, but then it takes on a life of its own, and it just becomes an externality to the economic system. And economists say, well, yes, we understand externalities are very important and they have to be internalized. And I think, well, if you understood enough and you really listened to the language, you wouldn't go around talking about it as an externality, because that in itself marginalizes and it pushes it to the periphery. And you're calling that only because you're putting market-based exchange at the center. Start bigger. Don't start on day one with supply and demand. Why don't you start by asking a question that's almost never asked? What is the purpose of the economy? What is it for? Because if we don't know what it's for, how on earth do we know what success looks like? And let's start with a really big picture of the economy embedded in society, embedded in the living world. So let's start on day one showing that the whole economy is a subsystem of social and ecological systems, deeply dependent upon them, and therefore must be compatible with their continuity. And secondly, the economy contains, in terms of the ways that humanity organizes for provisioning, not just the market and not just the state, but also the household, the space of unpaid caring work, and the commons, the place of co-creation. And these are 4 actually fundamental forms of provisioning that people have invented and reinvented across different cultures. And they have unique properties. And I would not want to live in an economy and a society that lacked any one of them, because they all bring unique values. But it's a really interesting conversation that almost never happens in economics degrees. Which one works best when? And what are the conditions required to make it work? And when does it break down? And how are they interdependent? How does the market depend on the household, on the commons, on the state? To me, this opens up the politics and the fascinating questions and the sociological questions of economics, but they barely ever get asked.